you guys for joining, and we welcome you to our SOLIDWORKS What's New in 2020 kind of redo. If you attended the first session, we had some technical difficulties about 75% of the way through, and most of the information was delivered, but we want to really do this thing justice and make sure that everybody has access to what we think are the best enhancements here in SOLIDWORKS 2020 in the new version. So hopefully you've been on one or two or more of our webinars in the past, and you know the rules. We'll be answering questions at the end, and we have a Q&A section in the Zoom webinar panel there at the bottom. If you click on that Q&A, and you can post a question. And if we can get to it in real time, we will, but just plan on having all questions answered at the end. So we're going to dive in. This is SOLIDWORKS What's New in 2020. We kind of have two separate portions of this webinar. The first portion is going to be helmed by Philip Lewis, who is our elite application engineer over here at Converge, and he's going to talk about some really important PDM enhancements. And then I'm going to take the reins and talk about our general SOLIDWORKS enhancements that you can look forward to in 2020. So I'll do a little bit of introduction here, and we'll dive right in. So first of all, my name is Tanner Knight. I'm a regional director here at Converge, and I come from the CAD hardware world with SolidVox, and really focusing on finding solutions for people who need hardware for their CAD solution, which is pretty much everyone still. I'm a SOLIDWORKS CSWE certified expert and a CAD and PDM infrastructure expert. We focus a lot on PDM, product data management here, and solving those larger IT challenges that face your engineering department. So I will now hand the reins over to Philip, who will introduce himself and then dive right into our content today.
All right, thanks, Tanner. So like Tanner said, my name is Philip Lewis. I'm a technical account manager here at Converge. And so I kind of specialize in PDM and cloud hosting. So we have a cloud hosting offering for PDM. So I wanted to start with PDM as well. There's a lot of really cool advancements with PDM 2020. Basically, SOLIDWORKS decided this year, they spent the last couple of years actually rewriting the add-in and the way PDM interacts with Windows Explorer. So they pretty much redesigned the entire thing. So I'll show you a lot of that. I'll walk you through some of the new features, but then I also have a 2020 Vault on my computer here, so I'll try to show you a little bit of that functionality in real time. Okay. So one of the big things that I was just describing, one of the big things with PDM in 2020 is this asynchronous refresh. And what that means is when you're browsing the Vault, when you're looking at, when things need to load information, so when the Vault needs to load a list of information, anytime it does that, like in the feature tree or in the add-in tree in SOLIDWORKS, you don't have to fully load that information before you can begin working. So I'll just show you that in a few minutes. So let's say you opened a file and you were, you know, that tree in your add-in, for the PDM users in the room, if that tree in your add-in in SOLIDWORKS has to load all of the information before you can rotate your model or start working on your model. Now that can load separately and you can begin working on your model while that information is still loading. So you can get to work a lot faster. You can just improve your efficiencies a lot with with just that asynchronous refresh feature. That's the big change. There's a couple other advancements as well that I have kind of individual slides for, so I'll show you what those look like. And then you can see in the second part of this slide here, we have some information on what's new with 3D CAD and some electrical simulation, some different features that are really cool that SOLIDWORKS has added this year, just with the core SOLIDWORKS product. Okay. Oh, I skipped over there. So this is what asynchronous refresh looks like. And I'm going to switch over to my own Vault in just a minute. But you can see on the right side of the screen here, that is a screenshot of the PDM add-in. So if I have SOLIDWORKS open and I have a model open, it might look a little bit different if you've ever used PDM. You can see now there's a little hourglass and it says loading on the right. Well, this would appear when I was opening a file or anytime that list in my add-in has to refresh the information. So now I can begin working while that's loading. Now, it actually took me a little while to get that screenshot because it was so fast. It actually took me a little while just switching back and forth to get it, time it right, because it was happening so fast. So you'll notice a lot of differences though with just clicking around and things like that. So I want to show you what that looks like first here. So I have a vault. If I switch over to my Windows Explorer, I have a vault here, a PDM vault called Test 2020. And if you aren't familiar with PDM, just kind of look around here and look at how I work here in PDM and what we can do and what PDM looks like, and then let us know, of course, any questions you have with PDM. So at Converge, we worked in PDM for a long time. We really are big fans of PDM, and this asynchronous refresh just makes it even better. So a lot of customers are starting to go to, a lot of SOLIDWORKS users are starting to go to a hosted solution or just moving servers in different places to work remotely. And latency becomes more and more of an issue when you do that. So this just helps a little bit more with that. So if you look here at my test vault here, I'm just browsed into a folder. So I'll just kind of click around here for a second. And as I click back and forth here, if you notice right here in the list area, take a look at when I click on that file, it happens so fast, but there's actually a little loading bar right there. So if I were to keep going and browse down to subfolders, and let's say I had 1,000 files in this folder, well, in all other older versions of PDM, it would have had to load that full list of 1,000 files. Then I would be able to click on my folder, go to the next folder. It has to load that list. If I had 2,000 files in that folder, I'm slowing myself down, just going folder to folder, because it has to load everything. Now you can continue browsing through folders without loading everything here. So that's the asynchronous refresh side of this. If I just click on a file, let's click on an assembly file here. And for those of you familiar with PDM, you see our tabs down here. You see our data card, our preview. We get a lot of different information here. But if I start clicking, you may have caught that and may have noticed that it had that loading bar again, or that little loading wheel. And as I click through here, see that loading, I can just kind of click back and forth to try to get it to, now it's all refreshed. But the first time through there, normally I would have had to wait for that to load. And if you have a little bit more latency in your environment, that's going to take a while to load. Or if I had an assembly with 2,000 files in it, it has to load that full list of files before I can click on the next tab. So it just starts slowing you down, and you probably will notice that your Windows Explorer application, just the native Windows application, might lock up too. So as it's trying to load those lists, it just has a lot of trouble with that over time with higher latency environments, and it can lock up. And then you have to, maybe Windows Explorer crashes, or you have to restart it or something like that. So this just helps. This helps a lot with keeping that seamless. So I can just be clicking really quickly here. So I know might be a little bit hard to watch, but I'm just clicking really quickly here to show you how quickly I can navigate back and forth. So things like browsing are much, much quicker with this new asynchronous refresh, which I really like. Things like check in and check out, those are still transferring data or downloading data. A lot of that is not going to be that much different, but it's a lot of the little actions, like when you're in SolidWorks, and if I open SolidWorks here, we can all see my add-in over here. And let me just go back to Windows Explorer here and open a file, just to show you what that looks like for those of you that haven't seen PDM before. So if I have a file open, it will show up in my add-in over here on the right. I see my PDM logo again, and I go to my add-in, and I can check out files, I can check in files. Well, if I had a lot of files listed right here, you're going to get that same asynchronous refresh with the list here. And this list can really add some overhead to your open times, and you're just switching back and forth between sub-assemblies and things like that, where it has to refresh all of this information. So description, file names, if I have a bunch of files here, now I don't have to refresh all of that information every time. So for those of you that have worked in PDM, you might notice this add-in can add a good bit of overhead to your work. And so now it's a lot more disconnected than it used to be, and it's going to do its own thing and be there when you need it, but not necessarily affect your efficiency as much. So it's pretty cool. So I can just close that. Let's go back to our presentation then. So that's what these screenshots are showing here, is what I was just clicking through. So you can see that loading bar right there for the bill of materials. So that's really nice functionality. I'm really glad that SolidWorks spent the time and rewrote that entire add-in. So we're looking forward to seeing more testing on that. As some of you probably know, but Service Pack 1 has just been released, so for 2020. So we've already been testing that and implementing that in a lot of our environments and seeing the benefits of that already. So some cool new features in PDM as well. So the first bit of this is all going to be about PDM. So some cool new features that have been added as well is this child reference state conditions. So if you, a lot of you may have asked for this at a certain time, but you can actually say, I can't submit this file or I can't approve a file until a child referenced file is in a certain state, or it has anything tagged on the data card, or if certain variables. So you can set conditions that say, I don't want this top level assembly to be approved yet until these other things have been taken care of. So that's a really good way to just continue to check your engineering work and make sure that you're doing things in the right order, so to minimize mistakes downstream. So I really like that. It's really easy to set up. Under conditions, there's now the child reference state variable. So a couple search enhancements. For the PDM users, you may have noticed that there was this little search bar, a lot like the Windows search bar. It kind of looks like it in my PDM window. So I'll just go ahead and switch back to that right now. So historically, the way you would search PDM vaults is you would go over here on the right to open search, and you can select all kinds of different searches. You may have saved searches. You could have different search cards that you can search, or you can just do this complete search. So there's a bunch of ways to use this search tool. Well, now you have this quick search right here, and it actually searches the vault instead of using Windows search, which some people use, which will be another window up here. But you can just type in things here, and it'll search you can search just this folder. You can search subfolders. So you can see I just typed in body there. I just wanted a quick search for this file, or any file that had that word body in it. So I can see all my states. I can see everything there. And you can actually rearrange these columns as well now in searches. So it's really nice to just find a quick search if you're just looking for a file that's in this folder, or you just want to grab something really quickly. Now the search cards as well, the actual built-in PDM admin, or in the PDM admin side, when you design a search card, that can take a little bit of time to load, and then your search window is a little bit limited with things that you can do. You can do a lot, but there's a couple things that you can't do in there. And so now this is just a lot more robust and built out. So I really like that feature. So that's what it looks like in a screenshot in a different environment. Okay, so this is that new search tool that I was kind of going over a little bit there for a second. So you can see how you can actually set up a drop down right here and show all kinds of different options for that search tool. So you can use these and or not operators. You can get really granular and detailed with your search if you kind of learn to type these out, like in this example here, kitchen or, and you could just say I want it to have this combination of words or numbers or letters and variables. So it's really nice to be able to search different things like that. So some really cool things too. If any of you have ever seen the PDM web client, it gets upgrades every year. There's always new functionality being added. Some of the new stuff that's been added is there's been a bit of a UI design, UI upgrade, which is really cool. It's a lot more like Windows Explorer now. So your web viewers log in and they go, oh, I don't really have to learn how to browse this anymore or work in here. I can pick it up really quickly. So you can see how you have this folder structure over here, just like you would in Windows Explorer. So that's really nice that you don't have to really learn a lot there. It's just really easy to pick up and really clean. It's a really clean interface. So I really like that. The 32-bit libraries have been retired that they used to use. So it's just kind of some back-end things that they've retired. So that now you don't have to. So the new web portal has a better preview and things like that. So there's some stuff like this. I've seen this a lot where this run tasks. Sometimes in the past, running tasks through the web viewer has been a little bit difficult or impossible. So there's a lot more functionality there too. And then this is what the actual user side looks like. So you can see it has even more of an upgrade with the UI this year. So I really like this 2020 interface. I think it's actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might be responsive where you can look at it even on an iPad or something. I'll have to double check that, but where it actually sizes a lot better. But now you can download, so you could download an entire file set, make some changes. So this download with references is really nice. And then you can make changes, upload those, change the state, and make some comments. So you can kind of do a lot. It's a lot more like actually logging into a real PDM vault or an actual Windows Explorer installed PDM vault. So I really like that. A lot more functionality there for users that are just maybe managers that just want to check in on things and approve files, stuff like that. So being able to see, you know, how many files are in the vault, the file type, so you can sort by different things like assembly or take a look at all your drawings. There's a lot there. Okay, so those are my maybe top 5 things that I've found are really awesome with 2020 PDM. So if you have any other questions about other features or any of that functionality, of course, let us know. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tanner to talk about some 3D CAD.
Thanks, Philip. We have not gotten any questions yet, but since we kind of have 2 real delineated sections here, feel free to ask any specific questions about what you just saw on any of those PDM enhancements. Since it's fresh in your mind, go ahead and ask those questions. I'll give you a second here. All right, so while you're formulating any questions you might have, I'll just start in and dive right in. So what's new in SOLIDWORKS 2020? Well, if you've been paying attention for the last 2 years, 2018, 2019, the What's New SOLIDWORKS releases, they haven't been all bells and whistles and whiz-bang new functionality. They've really been focusing on honing the functionality that already exists in SOLIDWORKS, making their platform more stable, having less crashes, making it play better with your graphics card and your CPU. So a lot of not necessarily what you'd call sexy enhancements, but enhancements that make your life a lot easier in a lot of other ways. So I think that for me personally, I would prefer for the refinement to come to the existing tools instead of keep having new tools be forced down our throats. So new functionality is great, but just keep in mind that at this point, SOLIDWORKS is really mature, and what they're doing is making it better rather than making it new. So let's dive right in. We got a few enhancements here. Phil, if you wouldn't mind progressing the slide. All right. Okay. So like I said, we've got a focus on continued performance and efficiency improvements. So not really focused on rolling out a bunch of new functionality, but making the tools we have better. User experience improvements as well, just making the overall SOLIDWORKS day-to-day experience a more pleasant thing is always a good thing. And workflow improvements in most applications. So SOLIDWORKS releases a list of all of the brand new specific new features every year, and they're in this format here where you can see we have a rundown of each one of them with a good explanation. And SOLIDWORKS makes good videos on YouTube as well if you want to check out a little more of these from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But let's take a look at what we find to be our most valuable enhancements in 2020. All right, so here's our hot list. We're going to focus on the 3D CAD type of workspace here first, and then we've got a few other areas of the software to talk about. But the most important enhancement from our perspective is this flexible components. And this is really great if you have any designs that have like baffles or chains or any kind of piping, flexible housing for something that needs to be represented in your design. Now you can design that with flexibility so that when your part changes due to any inherent motion that's in the design, then that flexible part will update and reorient itself based on any new positioning that you have in your assembly. So really nice functionality that people have been asking for a while. We have the ability to move our assemblies. Let's make it so these flexible parts can keep up with that movement as well. And that's exactly what we have here. The next thing we have expanded interoperability with 3D Interconnect. And we talk a lot about the 3D Interconnect tool, but if you have not heard of it, or if you just haven't come across it, this is something that was introduced, I think, in 2017, and it's made a lot of SOLIDWORKS users' lives easier. Basically, SOLIDWORKS has opened the door for allowing other non-native SOLIDWORKS CAD systems to open their files directly in SOLIDWORKS. So you have Inventor files or NX files, PTC Creo, Fusion 360, DWG, you name it. SOLIDWORKS can just open those files directly within the SOLIDWORKS environment without the feature recognition tool and allow you to work with those solids, really having a lot of functionality there. But in 2020, we expand that interoperability and we get the ability to work with the BREP information in DXF or DWG files, as well as IFC files, which are basically building files. And if you are a Revit user and you have really high-level building information, then chances are you have some IFC files, and now those will work within SOLIDWORKS as well. So 3D Interconnect, if you haven't read up on it, know that it's enabled kind of by default. So if you've imported any non-native SOLIDWORKS files into SOLIDWORKS, then you've used it and maybe not even known that you use it. But we really love that tool. And next we have more flexibility for surfacing. And the two key ones are the offset surface. If you offset a surface in any direction and for whatever reason the design of that surface prevents you from creating that surface, before it would just tell you, sorry, not going to happen. Now it will actually identify the faces that are not going to work based on your parameters, and then you can go back and either deselect those faces or change your parameters to make that offset surface work. So a little smarter action there with your surface creation, offsetting your surface. The second one is that now you can thicken in just more than the normal 2 direction. Think of this as like a mid-plane thicken. You can now thicken in 2 directions from a mid-plane. So small, but a nice little option if you have parts that require thickening and you thicken them in 1 direction and then you mirror it, you can cut back on that activity right now. So all available in 2020. These are our most important 3D CAD enhancements that we find. So if you wouldn't mind moving on, Philip. All right, so in simulation, we get a few new cool enhancements that are worth talking about. Number 1, the distributed coupling for pins and bolts. We can now have our bolts, all the faces that are involved with bolts and fasteners involved in our study. Before, those were just fixed and the study would work around them as best as possible, but it wasn't 100% realistic. So this is just one more degree of realism in your actual studies in SOLIDWORKS simulation, where you can have all of those faces for pins and bolts interacting in your simulation study. Next, I like this. This seems like a kind of a no-brainer. Why wasn't this here before? But you can now export the deformed shape of a SOLIDWORKS part. So you run it through your analysis. You find what's the most extreme deformation that's going to happen. You can save that specific snapshot out as a SOLIDWORKS part and then plug it into your assembly for clearance detection to make sure that while deformed, that new part is actually going to work within the context of your design. So pretty cool little option there. We also have the ability to calculate thermal loads for beams. So this was a tedious process previously, but now you can really get temperatures from thermal analysis on your models with beam elements and perform a stress analysis on those beams as well. The last one here for simulation is free body forces in nonlinear studies. So this is great if you have, say, for example, a design where you have 2 metal plates that interact in the same direction, only they have 360 degrees of freedom and they roll on, say, roller bearings or pins or something of that effect that's not actually affixed to the part, it's just in between the 2 parts, allowing them to move and restricting their motion. Well, now you can calculate for those free bodies that are in your designs and calculate stresses on them as well. So nonlinear linear studies allows you the ability to add those design aspects to your studies. So next we're going to get into the SOLIDWORKS electrical space here. Just a couple things to mention here. The electrical splice creation without components. So now you can create a welded or soldered connection in your 3D representation without a splice entry in the bill of materials. So it keeps your bill of materials tidy. You don't have to do that extra step. It's just kind of more intuitive, nice little layer of ease for you in your SOLIDWORKS electrical designs. And this last one, again, this is one of those enhancements where I was like, really? This was not something you could do, but now we can calculate the mass properties for wires, cables, and electrical harnesses. So you specify the materials and whatever is used in those parts there, and now you can calculate the mass and how that affects your center of gravity and all of that with all of these wires, cables, and electrical harnesses. Previously, that was not an option. So,
and Tanner,
nice
the PDM and electrical connector has gotten a lot better over the last few years too. So if anyone's interested in integrating those two, we can do that. We can help you with that too. And the latency issues have gotten a lot better too.
Yeah, that's
some really cool advancements there.
Really great to know. And one of the things that we just don't come across that too often, a SOLIDWORKS electrical implementation in conjunction with PDM, and it makes a lot of sense. So if you haven't considered that as an option, it might be worth thinking about, and we can definitely help you with that as well. So really good options there. And finally, this is for folks who are doing more manufacturing type stuff. The 3D printing options in SOLIDWORKS can vary every year. I don't know how many of you folks actually invested in 3D printer and used that for prototyping or even actual production, but the capability is there. There's hundreds of 3D printers being built, and they all do certain things very well. And now SOLIDWORKS has a 3D printer library. So you can access a huge list of commercially available 3D printer volumes. And they're just right there for you, loaded up. You can just select from a drop down, and whatever 3D printer you have, chances are it's in that list, and you can interface with it a lot easier that way. You can also create slices from SOLIDWORKS geometry. So if you need to build your part in stages, if you need to 3D print in 3 separate sections and then glue it together, then you can splice up your design based on those parameters and send it to your 3D printer and really take advantage of the 3MF, that file format, which was not available before. So there's no need to actually mesh the file as well. You can go direct to that .3MF file and send it to your 3D printer, which should be in that library list, and get creating. So a lot of nice new functionality for 3D printing support. And I don't know if you guys have ever come across the 3D, I think it's called Make. This is just shooting from the hip, but this is a service that SOLIDWORKS has rolled out over the last year, where you can actually get your 3D printer made from a number of different vendors right within the SOLIDWORKS interface. So that's kind of
I think it is Make. I kind of forgot the name as well, though.
Yeah, it's something you don't hear too much about. It's kind of in its building stages, but
I think it's going to grow a lot. It's pretty cool. But
yeah, it's poised to really help out the makerspace people, folks who are tinkerers with SOLIDWORKS, who want to get a little more complex with their 3D printed designs. So that's a cool little option. And finally, for manufacturing here, we have the SOLIDWORKS electrical and PCB enhancements for mechatronic designs. The most important ones being the rigid flex design. So for example, in this image here, you have a PCB with some ribbon cable. That ribbon cable can now be flexible, just like in the first enhancement that I talked about. That's very similar in that those flexible components will now continue to be flexible while your PCB can continue to be rigid. And if you need to move them, then your flexible components will maintain their orientation based on that flexible, rigid orientation. So small enhancement once again, but a nice one. Now flattening routes, you can speed up the flattening of electrical cables and harness designs with enhancements in SOLIDWORKS electrical. So that's just basically saying you have those ribbon cables and you need to figure out the total length. You can flatten them just like a sheet metal part. So that's functionality that took a lot of effort to figure out what the total length of one of those flexible wires was previously. So now it's just built right in. And finally, this last note is similar to the previous one. We can calculate, hold on here, we can calculate mass properties for wires, cables, and harnesses, and that's all within the SOLIDWORKS electrical tool as well. So you have a mass in those wires, you should be able to calculate them. Now we can. So a lot of different enhancements here, but we find that these are the most important for our customers and the people that we talk to every single day. I did see that we have one question posted so far.
Yeah, we had a question that I went ahead and tried to answer, tried to help out a little bit, but it was from Jacob about crashing with SOLIDWORKS 2020. He said it's been crashing a lot on him. So that can be a little bit of a tough one to diagnose, but usually it sounds like it's pretty repeatable, so we can probably figure that one out. But I'm going to have to just reach out to you, Jacob, and take a look at that offline. It's going to take a few minutes to probably gather some more information there to figure that one out. Could be a number of things.
Yeah. So any other questions about new functionality, things you'd like to see in SOLIDWORKS? We're all ears. We've just taken a little, I don't know, under an hour of your time. So hopefully we can maximize that here by answering any other questions that come up. All right, I think that oh wait, there's one more. Okay, SOLIDWORKS motion studies, all right, also from Jacob. SOLIDWORKS motion studies seem to only use 2 cores on CPUs. We talked to tech support to see if there was any workaround. SOLIDWORKS motion studies should offload to all the CPU cores that you have. I'm not sure.
Yeah, is motion studies, is that multi-threaded?
Yes, yeah, motion studies, okay. That should be part of the multi-threaded actions in SOLIDWORKS, which shouldn't limit it to only 2 cores.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've also experienced, Jacob? Maybe we can take that offline and see if there's something limiting your CPU. But,
yeah, we'll have to look at how that's being monitored as well.
Yeah, but you should be able to get more use out of your, if you have 6 cores, you should be using 6 cores in that processing of those motion studies. Okay, so
okay.
His answer was using CPU diagnostics. Right. They weren't able to find anything. Tech person didn't have a good answer. So that could also. Sorry, that was going to be just due to an installation error where SOLIDWORKS was installed, and for whatever reason, it entered in the registry to limit the CPU cores. So that could be fixed with the SOLIDWORKS repair. Go ahead, Philip. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say for anybody else on here still, if a really good place to start with troubleshooting things like this is just what we're going to need to start with is this RX. So everyone has this. If you have SOLIDWORKS installed, you go to SOLIDWORKS Tools, whatever version you have installed, and then go to this RX, and you can start looking through here. These tabs will tell you a lot of information. Like for my computer here, it'll tell you about your graphics card, which versions of the drivers you have installed. It'll give you a lot of information just as a first check. So the RX is a really nice resource, and we'll need that as a support tool as well to really diagnose further.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, go ahead and send any questions that come up after we end the webinar to sales@converge.design. I think that would be the best place to do it. Sales@converge.design. That will get in front of me, and if it's out of my depth, then I'll be able to bring in Philip and his team. But we want you to have the answers to any questions you might have. So we'll keep you posted. Stay tuned for any future webinars. We should be hosting them regularly, just like we always do. So we'll keep you posted. Hopefully you can join on the next few. And if you do have any questions, give us a shout, sales@converge.design, and we will get you taken care of. All right, thanks, folks.